up, you wingnut elegy. This country is still controlled by men in systems that were set up by men that are carefully crafted to continue to benefit men. So to put it in women-hating terms, you'll understand you're being hysterical.
Chelsea Handler, as she often does against Republicans, chose violence against JD Vance. This wasn't a clapback. It wasn't a snide remark. This was an all-out precision-guided missile that turned JD's unmasked misogyny into political wreckage. In about 30 seconds, she took apart the entire argument, destroyed Vance for his comments, and then folded him like a fitted sheet in spin class. It was a barrage of reminders for the vice president that, by JD's logic, many other leaders in history were unqualified to lead the country too, including the father of the nation and Jesus Christ.
But let's be clear, there's no correlation between childless people and the presidency. For example, our very first United States president, Mr. George Washington, didn't have children. In fact, he had 2 stepchildren. That's right, just like someone else I know. And to your point about Kamala not being fit because she's not a mother, I'd like to remind you that no president in the history of the United States has ever been a mother.
But Handler wasn't done just yet. She pointed out how he'd just Thanos-snapped his party's own most beloved historical figure. Somewhere a bald eagle just shed a tear. And the irony on display was actually insane. Defending Kamala Harris, Chelsea made sure Vance knew about all the facts. Like George Washington had 2 stepchildren, similar to Kamala Harris. But we doubt he'll understand. The historical drags were never going to be enough, though. Handler was fully locked in.
But maybe if she had 5 kids with 3 different men and a scandalous affair with a porn star and was convicted felon, that would be more palatable to Republican men.
The way this flows, it wasn't a punchline, it was a funeral. This wasn't a roast, this was a flamethrower from close range. She didn't just shut JD up, she smashed every man screaming about moral decay. Because where are your morals when you're electing someone whose resume genuinely reads like rejected Netflix smut? Traditional family values? Don't joke with that one. And it simply wouldn't be Chelsea if she didn't land an iconic one-liner to put Vance and his army of conservatives to bed.
I mean, my God, are we tired? You sad, diet, Mountain Dew, drinking, couch humping, dolphin porn aficionado, all of us childless cat and dog ladies are gonna go from childless and crushing it to childless and crushing you.
Chef's kiss, folks. This can only be described as an autopsy with glitter. If roasting Vance was an Olympic sport, Handler would be on the Mount Rushmore as she dragged him like no one ever has. The way she threaded together his greatest hits. No one's forgetting that infamous couch comment, then her shots at the energy drink-flavored masculinity on display. And whatever she meant by that dolphin thing, the result was iconic. Vance quickly became a meme, dipped in Mountain Dew Code Red, and got cooked by the wider internet audience for the misogynistic politician that he is. As for Handler, she successfully flipped the entire boring and tired narrative of how you're not a real woman if you haven't reproduced. But you might be wondering, what did Vance say that caused such an uproar? You probably wouldn't be surprised to know that it was just another thoughtless comment from the VP of the US.
What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too.
Doesn't it suddenly smell like cold meatloaf and cigarettes? It's a surprise we're not back in the 50s. This is the vice president of the USA, people. Yet he's calling women cat ladies simply because they didn't conform to his sacred path of Tupperware parties and childbirth. He should be busy looking into the dwindling economy and foreign policy. But we probably don't want him to do that either, given the whole barrage of tariffs and the dead pope. Instead, he's here holding weird therapy sessions inspired by Andrew Tate about why childless women are almost a national threat. As if not having kids would push women to turn into spell-casting spinsters plotting the downfall of America. As if Vance, Trump, and the current administration aren't doing it themselves.
And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it? I just wanted to ask that question and propose that maybe if we want a healthy ruling class in this country, we should invest more, we should vote more, we should support more people who actually have kids, because those are the people who ultimately have a more direct stake in the future of this country.
The problem is, this isn't just dumb anymore. It's dangerous. Somehow, political viability is only for those who've hosted a gender reveal party. JD genuinely believes that diapers equal patriotism and childless citizens are nothing more than NPCs in today's world. What he fails to notice is that he's implying childless people are less worthy of leadership. If that's the case, then half the country might as well be pushed out. No, nothing matters. No progeny, no patriotism, and no vote. Apparently, they don't have a direct stake if they don't have a baby. Their tax dollars, services, and sweat amount to nothing. And once again, it's a dangerous precedent to set. Not only is a uterus becoming a prerequisite for citizenship, it's also about control. This is where democratic values start waning, and let's be honest, it's all a part of forcing white people to have more kids. Because the only thing more terrifying than childless politicians is people of color having more kids. And it does get worse, people.
These people recognize that they're unhappy. They live in one-bedroom apartments in New York City. They've played their entire lives to win a status game. They're obsessed with their jobs. They're obsessed with their wealth and with their fortunes. And they look at middle America, people who are actually pretty happy with their lives and the choices that they've made. And they hate normal Americans for choosing family over these ridiculous DC and New York status games. When somebody calls out that, look, if you're a miserable cat lady, you should not force your misery on the rest of the country.
And it does get worse, people. Translation. If you don't live in the middle of nowhere and you have career goals, then you're an evil person. In fact, a normal American by definition is someone with over 2.5 kids and lives far from a Trader Joe's. Anyone else? Just an elitist goblin on their way to becoming a Grinch and firing shots at masculinity. The fact is, Americans chose this person to be the VP. This person who genuinely believes that happiness only lives in gender-normative despair and suburban minivans. He's projecting so hard at this point, he might as well just say that women with careers are broken and women without children are useless. And then he launches a few strays at journalists and other media personalities like Chelsea Handler.
You know this, Tucker. The most miserable people in the mainstream media are these mediocre journalists who have their entire sense of self-worth wrapped up in their crappy jobs instead of in their families. People who know where they came from, people who go home at night and see the face of a smiling kid, whatever their profession, I think they're happier, I think they're healthier, and they're going to be better prepared to actually lead this country.
At this point, you've got to question whether he's into the whole humiliation kink. Because this is the Vance gospel. Launch verbal diarrhea, aim it at women, and effectively shrink and shame everyone who doesn't fit his definition of American. So it was hardly a surprise that on her daily show, Chelsea sarcastically responded.
And then here I am miserable on the top of a mountain. And then here I am miserable scuba diving. And then I'm miserable again smoking a joint in a hot tub. Every day is truly a new circle of hell for me. The simple truth is that I'm not having a kid because I'm happier without them. And that's really not of anyone's concern but my own.
And she's absolutely spot on. The American dream has always been about freedom of choice. Unfortunately, JD and his gang want to take that way. They want to control the masses. They want to tell them what to do. But if people like Handler have her way, JD and co. won't get away with this monstrosity. But, Vance decided, the backlash simply wasn't enough. He took a long, hard look at it and decided it needed some gasoline.
Obviously, it was a sarcastic comment. I've got nothing against cats. I've got nothing against dogs. I've got one dog at home, and I love him, Megan. But look, this is not, people are focusing so much on the sarcasm and not on the substance of what I actually said. And the substance of what I said, Megan, I'm sorry, it's true. It is true that we become anti-family. It is true that the left has become anti-child. It is simply true that it's become way too hard to raise a family.
First, he came up with the oldest trick in a politician's playbook. Say something genuinely horrible and then pretend it was simply a joke. But no one's falling for it. This was contempt wearing a bow tie. This wasn't sarcasm, JD. As you'd expect, his gaslighting carried on. He tried to sandblast everything into some sort of cultural critique. Like the time he tried to justify mass deportations with Catholic theology, only to be taught a lesson by the Pope himself. As if the biggest issue in America is the gradual loss of family values. Then again, for JD, it's not about family. It's simply about people conforming to what he believes in. He's not a fan of diverse life experiences, so no one should have them either. Everyone should have a minivan, a mortgage, and some nice conservative talking points, because that is much easier to control than an adult without children.
This is about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family and anti-child. I'm proud to stand up for parents, and I hope that parents out there recognize that I'm a guy who wants to fight for you. I want to fight for your interests. I want to fight for your stake in the country, and that is what this is fundamentally about. The Democrats in the past 5-10 years, Megan, they have become anti-family. It's built into their policy. It's built into the way they talk about parents and children, and it's time that we call that out. I don't think we should back down from it, Megan. I think we should be honest about the problem.
Oh, and ever noticed how he tries so desperately to sound like some philosopher king? He really is out here living Andrew Tate's wildest dream. The fact is, parenthood does change people, but so do travel, trauma, books, grief, and therapy, and hundreds of other experiences. What parenthood does not do is make you a better leader by default. It only gives you more responsibilities, not some sort of automatic moral authority. More importantly, what Vance doesn't realize is that society and the left aren't anti-child. Most of them are simply broke. People aren't skipping parenthood because they want to. They're doing it because the math is ugly. The housing costs are sky high. Most don't recover from their student debt until late in their life. And childcare costs more than rent. Maybe if you try to fix that, then the rest of America could follow suit and have more kids. It's not a cultural crisis, so stop trying to paint it as one. And what he fails to realize is how mean his comments come across. It got to a point where even Jennifer Aniston couldn't let JD get away with these comments.
I truly can't believe this is coming from a potential VP of the United States. Jen tells JD, I pray that your daughter is fortunate enough to bear children of her own one day. I hope she will not need to turn to IVF as a second option, because you are trying to take that away from her too.
Great job, Vance. You just turned America's most unproblematic icon into an enemy. Jennifer Aniston isn't known for her political throwdowns, which makes her voice echo louder. She talked about how the real cost of JD's insensitive tirade was she was in disbelief. Vance basically offended millions of women who've lived lives that JD simply doesn't understand. The Friends star pointed out how his worldview was critical to not just every woman out there, but even the women in his own family. Because let's not forget, JD and his party are trying to limit access to reproductive health care. These reforms aren't just theoretical, and they're already impacting thousands of families across the country. So Aniston asked the simple question, what if JD's daughter has to go through something of that sort in her life? It was a mic drop answer wrapped in sheer concern. It came from someone who knows how difficult it can be to conceive, and she wasn't involved in some political scoring. She simply wanted to let JD know what was truly at stake.
You have women who think that truly the liberationist path is to spend 90 hours a week working in a cubicle at McKinsey instead of starting a family and having children. To me, what it is sort of a value system to replace the fact that they're all fundamentally atheist or agnostic. They have no real value system. Their only value system is achieve in a very conventional way. And so the idea that somehow they're pursuing racial or gender equity is like the value system that gives their life meaning.
But unfortunately, as far as the vice president is concerned, he doesn't care. He actually holds on to these beliefs. That's what should scare every American woman in particular. His platform is built on bad takes, but unlike many others doing it for attention, this is someone who lives by these opinions. If watching Vance fumble his way through gender politics brings you joy, you'll love seeing Margaret Brennan expose him even more.